Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the scenes in the government's most secret places? Those places shrouded in mystery, whose stories we can hardly believe, but which somehow give us goosebumps. Now, imagine spending decades working in one of these places, carrying the weight of secrets so dark and disturbing that they could forever change the way we see the world. This is my story, and today at age 70 I decided it's time to tell the truth. When my wife died 2 years ago, the last anchor that kept me silent disappeared. For decades, I feared what would happen if I opened my mouth. The government was ruthless. Threats, manipulations, attempts to destroy my credibility, all to ensure that what I knew would never be revealed. But now, what can they do to me? I've already lost everything. I'm old with no one to hold on to, and I carry an unbearable weight on my shoulder. You may have heard rumors about Area 51, about alien ships and secret experiments. I worked there. I have seen things that defy reality, and the scariest of all, what they are hiding is far worse than any fiction you have ever heard. At age 25, I was recruited directly from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, to work on one of the most secret projects in history. My work started simple, designing engines for military planes, but I was quickly thrust into a world of deep secrets and alien technology. It was there that I discovered what really hides beneath the Nevada desert. And no, it's not just flying saucers. What would you do if you knew your government was hiding something that could destroy our sense of reality? I asked myself this question every day for 45 years. Every night I laid my head on the pillow. I fought not to go crazy under the weight of the secrets I carried. My wife begged me to keep quiet, to protect our family, and I did. Until now, the world needs to know the truth, and I no longer have the time or fear to hide it. Today, when I reveal what I discovered, you will never see heaven the same way again. You can even try to forget, but the shadows that exist behind what I saw will haunt you. I ask you, are you prepared to hear what really happened at Area 51? Now that you're here, I promise you won't want to stop listening. But I warn you in advance, what I'm about to share is not for the faint of heart. Are you prepared for the truth? Because once I start, there's no going back. At the time, I was a young man full of ambition, recently graduated from MIT. My talent for physics and aerospace engineering had put me in the spotlight of several companies and institutions. But one day, I received an offer that I simply couldn't refuse. It wasn't just a job opportunity. It was a secret mission, something that took my breath away just thinking about it. The proposal came from a man dressed in a dark suit, sunglasses, and a badge I had never seen before. He knew things about me that no one else knew, details of my life that until then had been private. That's how it all started. You have been chosen for a special mission. I can't go into details here, but it is something that will change the course of history. You will be part of something bigger than anything you have ever imagined. You want to serve your country, don't you? Of course I wanted to. I believed in my country. The idea of working on a project so secret that not even my family could know about it seemed like a dream. I was told the location was on a top-secret military installation in the Nevada desert. They told me I would be working with the most advanced technology in the world. Nothing I could imagine would prepare me for what was to come. As soon as I reached the base, my excitement began to turn into a feeling of unease. Security was extreme, every step monitored. Armed guards stood at every corner, and the expressions on their faces made it clear that this was no place for mistakes. I went through countless security checks and swore, under penalty of treason, that I would never speak about what I was about to see. What caught my attention most, however, was the silence. It wasn't the kind of silence you find in a library or a scientific laboratory. It was a heavy, dense silence, as if everyone there knew that any word could have devastating consequences. The hallways were long and cold, and the feeling of being constantly watched was something that never went away. For the first few months, I was assigned to work on military aviation projects. It was helping to develop new engines and camouflage systems for fighter planes. The Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk, which would later become the world's first stealth aircraft, was one of the projects I worked on. But even though I was dealing with impressive technology, I knew that wasn't the real reason I was recruited. There was something else going on, something that all the scientists on the base seemed to avoid discussing, but that was impossible to ignore. Each day, I felt like I was being drawn into something much bigger, something that my superiors were trying desperately to keep secret. And it was then that I received the call to join a special project. What I believed to be the pinnacle of military engineering was in fact just the surface of a much darker conspiracy. When I was called to the general's office for the first time, nervousness took over me. It was one of those moments when you feel like something big is about to happen, but you don't know if it's an opportunity or a trap. When I entered the room, the general was sitting behind his desk, his eyes fixed on me. There was no cordiality. He studied me for a few seconds before speaking. "We have something that requires your talent, but you need to understand one thing. What I'm about to show you cannot be discussed with anyone outside this room, not even your colleagues here at the base." That sent a chill down my spine. But I nodded. The general stood up and handed me a folder. When I opened it, I saw images and reports that seemed unreal. They were remnants of materials, of something that seemed to have fallen from the sky. But it was no ordinary ship. The photograph showed fragments of metal that did not resemble any material I had studied at university. The chemical analyses listed in the report showed that this material was, in fact, unknown on it. We believe it is of foreign origin. But not foreign as you are thinking, said the general as he studied my reaction. He didn't need to say anything else. I knew what he was implying. The idea of being faced with something non-human was overwhelming, but I maintained my composure. I wanted to know more, and the general seemed satisfied with my restrained reaction. It was then that he informed me that I would be relocated to a more restricted area of the base, known informally as the Historic Sector. The name, obviously, did not do justice to what was stored there. It was no ordinary archaeology site. It was where the darkest and most disturbing secrets were kept. Upon being transferred to the historical sector, I was introduced to a new team made up of brilliant scientists from different areas. Among them were Dr. Lisa Reynolds, an anthropologist who specialized in ancient languages, and Dr. Michael Brown, a geneticist with an impeccable reputation. They were not just experts. They were people who had been chosen for their unique abilities to work on something that no one outside that base would ever imagine. It was during my first visit to the laboratory that I first saw what would change my life forever: the sphere. A metallic object, approximately 2 meters in diameter, that radiated a strange energy. Its surface was covered in symbols that initially appeared to be of Egyptian origin, but upon closer examination, we realized that they were a mixture of several ancient cultures: Inca, Mayan, Egyptian. It was as if all these civilizations had left their mark on this artifact, and most disturbingly, the material from which the sphere was made did not exist on Earth. At that moment, the first suspicions began to emerge. What was that object really? And why was he there, hidden in the middle of the Nevada desert, under the strictest government surveillance? I knew I was about to discover something that would change everything I believed. The historic sector of Area 51 was completely different from any other part of the base. It wasn't a place of cold corridor and military technology. Walking through the armored doors that led to this area, it was like entering a secret museum, a museum of forgotten horrors and mystery. The environment had a strange, almost spiritual atmosphere. The walls were covered in showcases displaying artifacts from ancient civilization, but they were artifacts that would never be found in any ordinary museum. There were golden Inca masks, Mayan statues, and Egyptian papyrus scrolls. But among these objects were things that did not belong to this world. The first thing I noticed upon entering was the feeling of being watched, as if every piece in the room had a terrible, invisible story to be told. Beside me, Dr. Lisa Reynolds walked with an expression of reverence. She was responsible for cataloging many of the objects there, and I noticed there was a sparkle in her eye, a mixture of fascination and fear. In the center of the room was a pedestal lit by cold laboratory lights, and on it sat the sphere. It was smaller than I imagined, about the size of a dining table, but it exuded a sense of grandeur. The metallic surface reflected the ambient light soft, and the symbols that covered it seemed to have been engraved with an almost supernatural precision. Dr. Jonathan Carter, a world-renowned biologist who led the team, approached me with a serious face. He explained to me that the sphere had been discovered inside an Egyptian pyramid, but that its origin was not in fact human. According to him, the object had been found along with a series of other equally strange items, all of them disconnected from any known technology. The United States government, upon discovering the artifact, quickly transported it to Area 51. So what you're seeing here, Carter said in a deep voice, is more than just an ancient artifact. The sphere contains secrets that surpass our current understanding of science. And most impressively, she is active, albeit in a subtle way. Hearing that, I felt a chill down my spine. How could a technology that dated back millennia be Carter didn't explain, but the look he exchanged with Lisa made it clear to me that there was much more to the object than they were ready to tell me at that moment. I was now involved in something much bigger than I expected, something that somehow connected ancient civilizations and forces beyond Earth. But what terrified me was what would come next. The sphere, with all its complexity, was not just an exhibition. She was the key to something much bigger, something I would soon discover. I approached the sphere with a caution I wasn't used to having. It was almost as if the object was watching my every move, judging my presence. As I got closer, I noticed that the symbols on its surface seemed to glow faint, as if they had a life of their own. Dr. Lisa Reynolds was already at my side, examining every detail with a mix of admiration and concern. "These symbols are not from a single civilization, as we had initially thought," she said without taking her eyes off the sphere. "This is a combination of cultures. Inca, Egyptian, Mayan. It's as if all these civilizations were connected to something bigger, something we can't fully understand." I leaned in to take a closer look. The symbols were enigmatic, engraved with almost impossible precision. I had studied a lot of material in my career, but nothing like this. The sensation I had when touching the surface was one of deep coldness, but there was a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to pulse from within the object. It was as if he were alive, as if he was waiting for something. Dr. Carter approached, interrupting my thoughts. He was holding a tablet with various readings, and showed me the measurements being taken around the sphere. The material of the sphere is unknown to us. We did all possible analysis, but we were unable to identify its composition. It doesn't look like any metal or compound we've ever seen on Earth. He paused before continuing, as if he needed to gather the courage to say the next words. And there's more. We detected a slight energy emission. It's almost insignificant, but it's there, pulsing from within. I felt a tightening in my stomach. It was one thing to discover that the sphere was not of Terran origin. It was quite another to realize that she was emitting energy. Something in that artifact was alive, somehow. Dr. Reynolds, watching the readings on Carter's tablet, seemed torn between scientific fascination and terror. "Have you tried opening it?" I asked, unable to help myself. "We tried," Lisa replied, looking away, "but we couldn't. It seems like the symbols are the key, but we don't know how to align them correctly. We are studying the ancient inscriptions and papyri found alongside the sphere, but so far, all we have are theories. It was always like this. In Area 51, what wasn't a secret was a theory, and what wasn't a theory was something even worse. I got even closer to the sphere. Trying to understand, my heart was beating faster than normal. There was something in that room that didn't fit, something deeply disturbing. It wasn't just the fact that the sphere was an alien artifact. That's what it represented. A technology so advanced that even millennia after its creation, we were still unable to understand it. And then, without warning, the sphere began to emit a low, almost humming sound, echoing throughout the room. Everyone looked at each other, fear rising in the air. Something was happening, and we had no control over. The low sound that the sphere began to emit became more acute, as if it was responding to our presence. The soft hum reverberated off the walls of the room, and the tension in the air became palpable. Dr. Carter, who until then had remained calm, began to appear uneasy, looking worriedly at the monitor that displayed the sphere's energy readings. "Something is happening," he murmured, more to himself than to us. Without warning, the buzzing increased drastically in volume, filling the room with a deafening sound. The lights in the room began to flicker uncontrollably, and the sphere, which until then had remained static, began to slowly rotate on its axis. The movement was almost hypnotic. The light reflected off the metallic surface created shadows that danced on the walls as if they were alive. Lisa and I instinctively pulled away. The humming intensified, and the room seemed to pulse with it. The readings on the monitors were completely out of control. Suddenly, Dr. Carter quickly approached a control panel on the side of the room. He began typing frantically, trying from what I could understand to stop the sphere's reaction. "We're losing control," he said, his voice tense. "We shouldn't have messed with this without knowing what we were doing." As he typed, the sphere began to emit small sparks of light. It was as if the surface was combusted, but without actually burning. The metal glowed with a surreal intensity, and the entire room seemed to vibrate with the energy emitted. Suddenly, the sphere released a small shockwave that traveled through the environment, knocking documents, instruments, and equipment around. We were all thrown to the ground by the impact. The sound was deafening, and for a moment I thought this might be the end. The sphere, however, continued to rotate and emit that uncontrollable energy. The feeling of danger was inescapable. Even without knowing what was happening, we knew we were about to cross an irreversible limit. Dr. Carter, his face sweaty and pale, scrambled to his feet and tried to press an emergency button on the dashboard. Suddenly, the sound died down and the lights returned to normal. As if someone had turned off the catastrophe switch, the sphere abruptly stopped rotating, returning to remaining motionless on the pedestal as if nothing had happened. The silence that followed was as heavy as the deafening sound that had hit us moments before. We were all breathing hard, sweaty, and terrified. I looked at Lisa, who gave me a look of pure panic. Something terribly wrong had happened. Whatever that sphere was, it was beyond any human understanding or control. Carter stood up, still dazed, and looked at the sphere with an expression that mixed admiration and terror. That was just the beginning. In the chaos that followed the incident, as we tried to regain our calm and reorganize our thoughts, something even more disturbing happened. The sphere, now apparently inert, made a soft click, as if it had unlocked something inside. We all stood still, exchanging nervous glances. Dr. Carter approached cautiously, observing the object with an almost morbid curiosity. Suddenly, a small opening formed in the metallic surface of the sphere, and a cloud of dense, foul-smelling gas escaped into the room. The smell was unbearable, and everyone quickly covered their faces with their hands or clothes. Dr. Michael Brown, who had arrived minutes before the incident, shouted for everyone to keep their distance. "We don't know what this gas is. It can be toxic." We were quick to activate the emergency ventilation system, and the smoke began to dissipate, but not without leaving a nauseating trail. When the air finally cleared, something unexpected revealed itself within the sphere. Lisa, who was next to me, held my arm tightly, her eyes wide. There, inside the sphere, was a body. It was small in the fetal position, mummified as if it had been sealed centuries ago. Its skin was dark and wrinkled, and it was covered in a strange helmet with carved symbols that were similar to those on the sphere. The scene was disturbing. Something about that body felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Dr. Brown, the geneticist, was the first to approach, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. He knelt before the mummified body, examining it carefully. With a trembling hand, he removed the helmet, revealing an elongated skull, something that didn't look completely human. This is no ordinary mummification, Brown said, his voice barely audible. The bone structure is different, and there's more. He pointed to the body's hands, which were holding something tightly against their chest. It was an ancient papyrus, rolled up carefully, as if it had been placed there deliberately. Lisa, with her expertise in ancient languages, slowly approached. She took the papyrus with a hesitant expression and began to unroll it as carefully as possible. "It's Egyptian," she said, barely breathing. "But there is something else. Other writing, that is not just Egyptian." She pointed to some unfamiliar characters, unlike anything we had ever seen. They looked like aliens, something that didn't belong on Earth. As Lisa continued to analyze the papyrus, Dr. Brown looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was the look of someone who realized they were facing something that could change everything. "This body is a hybrid," he murmured. "That's not completely human." My muscles froze. The gravity of that revelation fell on me like a ton of bricks. The body inside the sphere wasn't just a piece of strange archaeology. It was proof that we were dealing with something far beyond what any of us could understand. Something that mixed what was human with what was clearly not of this world. And that was just the beginning. As Lisa carefully analyzed the papyrus, the silence in the room was deafening. All of us, including Dr. Brown and Dr. Carter, were left in a state of suspension, waiting for Lisa's words as if our lives depended on them. What could that manuscript reveal about the mummified body, about the sphere, and most importantly, about what it all meant for humanity? Lisa began to read the inscriptions in a low voice, her hands shaking. She shook her head in disbelief several times as her eyes swept over the ancient word. "This isn't just Egyptian, as I first thought," she said finally. "There are several layers of writing here. Some are Mayan, others are Inca, and there are characters that I can't identify at all. They do not belong to any civilization on Earth that we know of." She pointed to the most enigmatic symbols, which seemed to have been written with an unknown technique. They were intricate, almost looking like circuitry patterns, but clearly symbolic. Lisa continued, "According to this text, the sphere is not an isolated artifact. There are mentions of other similar objects that were left in different parts of the Earth, connected to ancient civilizations. The texts speak of guides who came from heaven and offered knowledge to humans. These guides, or gods as they were called, were responsible for teaching ancient civilizations secrets about life, death, and immortality. The mention of immortality made the air in the room feel even heavier. I knew we were dealing with something much bigger than we thought. The sphere, it seemed, was part of a network of artifacts left by the god, those who had direct influence on the course of human history. Dr. Carter, who until then had kept his gaze fixed on the mummified body, stepped forward. "So all these civilizations, the Mayans, the Incas, the Egyptians, they weren't just creating myths. They were documenting interactions with these beings. This body, this child, she was meant for something more. She's not just a hybrid, she's part of a bigger plan." Lisa nodded, still absorbed in reading the papyrus. "Exactly. This document talks about a seed left by the gods. They mixed their blood with that of humans to create a new race, a species destined to rule among us but never completed. Somehow this plan was interrupted. This child was sealed within the sphere before he could complete his transformation. The idea that these extraterrestrial artifacts influenced ancient civilizations, and that somehow humanity was just part of a larger plan, left everyone in the room perplexed. Did the government know this? How long were they aware of these connections? And most importantly, why now? Why was the sphere only activated now, and what did this mean for the future of humanity? These questions swirled around in my mind, but I knew the answers wouldn't be simple. We were just beginning to uncover the secrets of a conspiracy that spanned millennia and connected human history to something far beyond our understanding. Dr. Brown, with his expertise in genetics, was about to reveal what could be the scariest discovery of all. He had spent hours examining the mummified body, collecting DNA samples and carrying out detailed genetic analysis. What he found made his blood run cold. That morning he called us into the genetics lab, visibly shaken. The face that was once calm and confident now showed signs of deep concern. Something about the mummified body wasn't right, and he knew it better than anyone. "I've examined many cases of genetic mutations, but this," he began, hesitant, "there is no other way to say this. We are dealing with genetic manipulation at a level that surpasses anything we know of in modern science." He showed us the results on a screen. The DNA from the mummified body was a complex mixture of human genetic material, and something that could not be identified. The sequences were mixed together in a way that suggested a deliberate intervention, a conscious effort to create a new species. "Look here," he said, pointing to the genetic chains. "This is not a random mutation. This was planned. The creature within the sphere was created for a specific purpose. Her DNA has been manipulated to make her something that is not quite human, but also not quite alien. It's as if they were trying to create a bridge between the two species. The concept of advanced genetic manipulation, carried out by otherworldly beings thousands of years ago, was frightening. We were faced with proof that the gods of ancient civilizations were not just mythological figures. They were scientists, manipulating human DNA to achieve a goal we did not yet understand." Lisa looked at the results in horror. "That means they were trying to create a new form of life, something hybrid that could live among us without us noticing. Or worse, something that could become superior to us." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dr. Carter, with a heavy voice, added, "The sphere was designed to protect this creature, this hybrid. Perhaps it failed to fulfill its purpose before, but now that it has been activated, perhaps it is trying to complete what it started. This could explain the energy she is emitting." His words hung in the air like a warning. The sphere was not just an ancient object. She was part of an experiment that could have unimaginable consequence. And now, with her awakening, what she had begun millennia ago was perhaps about to begin again. The fear in the laboratory was palpable. We were dealing with technology so advanced that it made us feel small and insignificant. The genetic manipulation that these beings performed was something that not even our modern science was capable of replicating. What else could they do? And what did this mean for the future of humanity? We didn't have the answer. All we knew was that we were faced with a terrifying truth that no one outside that laboratory was prepared to hear. And the worst? Maybe it was too late to stop what was about to happen. As we continued to uncover the sphere's secrets, an unexpected connection began to form between the artifact and ancient mythology, specifically the Egyptian god Horus. Lisa, always immersed in her translations and interpretations of the ancient papyri, was increasingly convinced that the mummified body we found inside the sphere was somehow related to the myth of Horus, but not as a simple mythological figure. She approached us, holding yet another recently completed translation of one of the ancient texts she had discovered in the historical section. His eyes sparkled with excitement, but also with deep concern. "I believe that the child inside the sphere was meant to be something more," Lisa began, her voice wavering. "According to these texts, Horus was not just a god, he was part of a lineage that came from outside of Earth. They did not descend from the sky as gods to the ancient Egyptians, Mayans, or Incas. They came from beyond, from other worlds, and left their seed among humans." The idea was disturbing. These gods, which had long been part of revered mythologies, could in fact have been extraterrestrial beings with a deliberate plan to change humanity. Lisa continued, "Horus, according to the texts, left a child here. A child who was supposed to be the next stage of this hybrid evolution, but something went wrong. The child that was placed in the sphere was not what they expected. Maybe it was a girl instead of a boy, or maybe the timing was wrong. Either way, their plan failed, and the sphere, like a cradle or capsule, remained inactive until now." This revelation left me stunned. We were not just dealing with ancient extraterrestrial technology, but a disrupted cosmic plane. What was the sphere waiting for? And why now, after so many millennia, had it been activated again? Dr. Carter, who was also listening intently, approached the mummified body and the helmet he was wearing. He seemed mesmerized by it, touching his helmet gently. So this child, this hybrid, should have been taken back to heaven to complete his transformation. But she was left here, trapped in a broken cycle. And now with the sphere activated, perhaps the process has resumed. My thoughts started to spin. If Horus and the other gods were extraterrestrial beings who had left this child on Earth for something greater, what did that mean for the rest of us? We were dealing with an alien civilization that had not only visited us in the past, but was perhaps about to return to complete an experiment that had begun thousands of years ago. And most terrifying of all, activating the sphere could be the first step in this return. After hours of discussion and analysis, Dr. Brown and Lisa were trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. The sphere, the mummified child, and the connections between ancient civilizations were a complex web that continued to expand. But what was really haunting us was the simple question, why now? What had caused the sphere to suddenly activate after so long? As Lisa studied the text deeper, she found something that could provide an answer. In the papyrus she had translated earlier, there was a reference to a right time, a period in which the stars would be aligned in a specific way, allowing the sphere to reactivate and continue the process that had been interrupted. The problem? That right time seemed to be now. Dr. Carter, who until then maintained a more scientific stance, began to admit the possibility that the sphere's return to activity could be linked to something much larger than the stars. Ancient civilizations were obsessed with celestial alignment, he began, staring at the sky through the laboratory window. What if these beings they called gods were waiting for this exact moment, waiting for the right alignment to continue what they started? Discomfort took over all of it. If the sphere had been reactivated due to the alignment of the stars, that meant something was about to happen. Something big. It was at that moment that the sphere began to vibrate again. But this time, the sound was not a simple hum. It was like a rhythmic beat, a low pulse that resonated in the room as if it was in sync with something beyond us. Dr. Brown looked at the monitors with an alarmed look. "It's emitting a signal," he said, almost in disbelief. "The sphere is communicating with something." Lisa rushed to the control terminal, trying to pick up the frequencies and understand where the signal was being sent. The entire room was filled with tension, everyone waiting for an explanation. The monitors began to show a complex pattern of waves which, it seemed, were being sent beyond the Earth's atmosphere. "This isn't going to any satellites or ground stations," she said, her voice shaking. "It's going to deep space as if it was calling something." I felt my stomach drop. The sphere was emitting a signal, calling something back. Perhaps the same gods who had started it. The same people who left that hybrid child here, trapped in a capsule for millennia. Dr. Carter looked at the sphere with a mixture of fear and fascination. If they're receiving that signal, maybe they're coming back to finish what they started. The thought that we were about to witness the return of an alien civilization was paralyzed. We knew very little about their intentions. What would they do when they returned? Would they continue with the experiment, or would they find an Earth that was now beyond their control? The sphere pulsed, sending its call to the cosmos, and whatever was out there was now listening. The morning after the sphere's awakening, the atmosphere at the base was tense, almost unbreathable. We all knew something big was about to happen, but no one had the courage to put it into words. However, we weren't the only ones to notice. A few hours after the signal incident, a delegation of high-ranking military and government officials arrived at the base, surrounding the historic sector with an urgency we had never seen before. Something was very wrong. I was in the lab with Lisa and Dr. Brown when two men in dark suits walked in without warning, demanding that all the experiment data be turned over immediately. Their faces showed no emotion. It was as if they already knew more than we did, and were just confirming an old suspicion. They brought with them direct orders from high up. Everything we were studying was now top-level confidential. Even between us, communication should be minimal. It was at that moment that I realized the government already knew. They always knew. Area 51 wasn't just a research site for stealth and experimental technology. They had been studying these alien artifacts for decades, if not centuries. The sphere was just one piece in a much larger puzzle, and we had unknowingly activated something that could put their entire plan at risk. One of the military officers, General Matthews, called an emergency meeting of the entire scientific team. The serious expression on his face said it all. When he spoke, his words came like orders. "Or you think you are here to do science? But let me make it clear. From now on, what you know or think you know is under the direct control of the United States government. This base is not just a research center. It's one of the most important places for global security, and what you messed could compromise the integrity of our nation." There was a calculated coldness to his words. The general knew what we were up against, but he had an agenda. He explained that the signal emitted by the sphere had been captured by military satellite, but had not been recorded by any other country. This was important. It meant that up until that point, only the United States knew anything was happening. "Let's treat this as a matter of national security. None of this should leave here," ordered Matthews. What once seemed like a scientific discovery began to turn into a power play. The government was less concerned with what the sphere could do, and more focused on how they could use it as an advantage over other nations. The general demanded that all studies and analyses be stopped immediately until he could bring in a team of experts to continue the work. I felt trapped. Everything we had learned, all the progress we had made, was being confiscated and sealed behind a veil of secrecy and manipulation. There was something much bigger going on, and we were just scratching the surface. But the big question that was going through my mind was, what did the government know about the return of these extraterrestrial entities? And how far were they willing to go to keep everything secret? It was that same night, after the meeting, that things began to take an even darker turn. The sphere, which until then had been relatively calm after the signal incident, began to show signs of intense activity. Power readings, which had previously been low and constant, began to fluctuate wildly. Dr. Brown was the first to notice. He entered the control room, pale and sweating, holding a clipboard with the latest measurements. "Something big is happening. We need to monitor it closely. The sphere's energy is increasing exponentially," he said, his voice cracking with fear. Dr. Carter and I ran to the control room. The screens flickered frantically, while the monitors showed never-before-recorded power spikes. The heartbeat pattern had changed. It was no longer a calm, rhythmic beat, but something disordered, as if the sphere was responding to an external force. "What is causing this?" I asked, unable to hide my anxiety. Lisa, who was now completely immersed in her studies, seemed to understand more than any of us. She ran over to one of the terminals and began typing quickly. His eyes were wide as he analyzed the data. "I think the signal was received," she said, her voice low and dark. "Someone or something out there heard the message from the sphere." The atmosphere in the room became deathly silent. The implications were clear. If the signal had been picked up by some extraterrestrial entity, it meant they were on their way. The sphere was no longer just emitting a signal, it was responding to a callback, and whatever was coming, it wasn't something we could control. Dr. Carter, normally skeptical and calculating, began to lose his cool. "We need to deactivate this now. We have no idea what we are invoking. If these entities are really coming here, we need to stop them." His voice was almost a scream. But how? There was no way to simply turn off the sphere. It was running on its own, driven by technology that was far beyond our understanding. What we knew until then was that these alien gods had visited Earth in the past, manipulating ancient civilizations and leaving their seeds among us. Now, they were answering the call. They were returning to finish what they started. As everyone frantically discussed what to do, the lights in the room began to flicker. The electrical power was momentarily cut off, and a low, steady sound, almost like distant thunder, filled the air. We ran to the windows, and what we saw left us paralyzed. In the sky, there were lights, many lights, moving in an organized manner. These were not military planes or drones. They were something different. Something that moved too fast to be registered by any radar. The sphere in the room began to spin again, emitting flashes of light that cast shadows on the wall. "They're here," Lisa murmured in an almost inaudible whisper. Dread gripped everyone. The entities, or whatever was out there, had received the signal. The return was happening, and we mere mortals were just small pieces in a cosmic game that was about to unfold. What would we do next? As mysterious lights hovered in the sky and the military base went on high alert, panic was written on the faces of every person there. The sphere spun at breakneck speed, emitting pulses of light and sounds that seemed to intensify as the lights in the sky approached. It was clear to everyone that the signal sent into space had been received and responded to. Amidst the chaos, I knew I would need to make a decision. We were on the brink of something unimaginable, a direct interaction with extraterrestrial entities that had left their mark on Earth millennia ago. However, as fear gripped the team and the military began to arm itself for an uncertain confrontation, I asked myself, what did these entities really want? Were they returning to destroy, or to continue the interrupted experiment? The tension in the air was palpable. Dr. Carter insisted that the only way to protect humanity was to destroy the sphere. He believed that if we deactivated the artifact, we could stop these entities from advancing, perhaps even forcing them to retreat. Lisa, on the other hand, was torn. She believed that the return of these entities did not necessarily mean destruction. Their studies suggested that the ancient extraterrestrial gods were in search of something greater, something that could benefit or transform humanity. But I couldn't make up my mind. Part of me wanted to destroy the sphere, to stop anything beyond our control from coming to it. After all, human history is full of examples in which encounters with the unknown resulted in catastrophe. However, there was another part of me, the scientific, curious part, that wanted to know what would happen if we allowed the process to continue. General Matthews, pressed by the situation and orders from above, was impatient. He entered the control laboratory demanding quick answers. He wanted the sphere to be destroyed immediately, with the risk of a military offensive against anything that came from the sky. "We have missiles ready, armed troops." "Let's not wait to find out if they come in peace or not," he shouted, punching the table. "You scientists can argue all you want, but I am responsible for the security of this country." It was then that I realized I was at the center of it all. The decision would not just be made by the military or scientists. I needed to take a stand. Something inside me, perhaps a deep intuition, told me that the sphere and the entities were linked in a way that could not simply be severed. Destroying the sphere now could have even more devastating consequences than going through with the plan. In the midst of that whirlwind, an idea began to form in my mind. Perhaps if we could make contact before the destruction occurred, we could discover the true intentions of these entities. The time was against us. The lights in the sky were getting closer and closer, and the fate of humanity seemed to hang by a thread. I looked at Lisa, at Dr. Carter, at General Matthew, and knew that the final decision would have to be mine. With the sphere pulsing and the lights in the sky rapidly approaching, the base was in a state of absolute panic. All security protocols had been activated, and General Matthews was giving frantic orders over the radio, trying to coordinate a military response that could repel whatever was approaching. But I knew that conventional weapons would have no effect against these entities. We were dealing with something far beyond our understanding and ability to defend. As the military prepared for the worst, Lisa approached me, her face marked with tension. "We need to do this now. We need to try communication. They are coming in response to the signal, and the sphere is the key to that. If we destroy everything, we may never know what they really want, and any chance of peaceful dialogue will be lost." I knew she was right. There was something about the sphere's pattern of behavior that seemed synchronized with the approaching lights. He seemed to be waiting for a moment, a connection. I looked at General Matthews, who was clearly willing to pull the destruction trigger at any moment, and decided to act. There was a small window of opportunity, and I couldn't let fear make the final decision. I ran to the control panel, where Dr. Brown was desperately trying to stop the sphere's energy overload. With a final effort, I adjusted the sequences of symbols on the surface of the sphere, hoping that this would establish clear communication. The sphere began to emit a different sound, a more harmonious, less chaotic sound, and suddenly the lights in the sky stopped advancing. For a brief moment, everything was silent. The tension that had filled the air seemed to have dissipated, but what came next was something no one could have predicted. The sphere emitted a pulse of light that spread throughout the laboratory, illuminating every face there with an almost spiritual intensity. The lights in the sky responded with an intense glow, and we could see indistinct shapes materializing around the ships. They were not conventional vehicles. They were something more ethereal, as if the entities were made of pure energy, projecting their presence into our reality. Dr. Carter, who until then seemed determined to destroy everything, was left speechless. The entities began to move towards the base, but not as enemies. It was as if they were connecting to what we were doing, as if the sphere was a portal that allowed them safe passage. "They're watching us," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide in wonder and terror. Meanwhile, General Matthews was frozen. He who had previously spoken of destruction now seemed paralyzed by doubt. The question that no one knew how to answer was simple. What did these entities want? And then, with one last pulse of light, the sphere slowed. The lights in the sky disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, leaving us in absolute silence. Contact had been made, but what did it mean? The entities had observed us, but had not fully revealed themselves. Maybe they were waiting for another moment, or maybe they had gotten the answer they needed. The silence that followed was disturbing. We were on the brink of something monumental, but we had no idea what would come next. We had made contact with a force much greater than ourselves, and deep down we all knew this was just the beginning of something much greater. I turned away from the control panel, exhausted. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The world would never be the same. At the end of this story, we are left with a deep reflection. What do we really know about the universe around us? Are we prepared for what might be out there, waiting to be discovered? Or are we on the brink of something that goes beyond our understanding? Alien entities, hidden secrets from the past, and the manipulation of humanity itself by superior forces lead us to question whether we are ready to face the truth. And you? Do you believe that somewhere in the cosmos, someone or something is watching us, waiting for the right moment to make contact? Leave your opinion in the comments. We want to know what you think about this possibility. If you like this intriguing and suspenseful story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next story. We have many more exciting and terrifying accounts of the mysteries of the universe that you won't want to miss. See you next time.